Get rid of that mutt before sunset. I don't care where you leave him." The man's voice was sharp, cruel, slicing through the stillness of the humid afternoon. The dog whimpered as the rope bit tighter into his neck, tethering him to a twisted acacia tree near the forest's edge. His body was filthy, covered in bruises, ribs showing through matted fur. He didn't understand what he'd done wrong, only that the hands that once fed him now beat him, and the place he called home had become a prison of silence and hunger. The sun dipped low, throwing long shadows across the dusty terrain as the man turned his back and drove away, engine roaring, spitting gravel over the dying grass. The dog, barely a year old, collapsed from the weight of dehydration, eyes swollen with infection, ears twitching weakly at the faint sounds of the wild returning to life behind him. He wasn't alone for long. A distant rustle in the brush sent his heart pounding in panic, but he didn't have the strength to lift his head. Branches parted, and out stepped a creature he'd never seen before, tall, black-haired, with intelligent eyes. A chimpanzee. Tao, the alpha of the sanctuary troop, paused when he saw the dog. He tilted his head curiously, sniffed the air, then retreated. Minutes passed. The dog drifted in and out of consciousness, dreaming of old familiar things, of a boy who used to laugh and scratch behind his ears, of cool water and warm porches. Then he heard footsteps again. Not one, but many. They had returned. 5 chimpanzees this time. One carried fruit. Another, oddly, had a water bottle grasped awkwardly between its feet. Tao approached slowly and crouched beside the dog. With uncanny care, he reached forward, not to strike, but to touch. Gently his fingers brushed the dog's shoulder, then the rope. The dog flinched but didn't resist. He was too tired to fight anymore. What followed was something no human could have expected. In complete silence, the chimps worked together. Tao began chewing at the frayed rope, while another chimp peeled fruit and placed pieces near the dog's mouth. The water bottle was dropped beside him, its cap already loosened. Slowly, drop by drop, the dog began licking the dirt-stained water. From the tree canopy above, a woman had been watching through her binoculars, breath caught in her throat. Dr. Nessa Graves, the field director of the Gombe Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, had seen strange behavior from her chimps before, but never like this. She radioed her assistant in a whisper. "Liam, bring the emergency kit, now, and a carrier. You won't believe what I'm seeing." Nessa approached carefully, but it wasn't the dog that barked. It was Tao who turned to face her, not with fear, but caution, as if guarding a wounded friend. She'd worked with Tao for 10 years, seen him rescue orphaned infants, lead peace among rival troops, but never had he brought a foreign species into his care. Nessa dropped to her knees and spoke softly. "Easy now. I see him. You're helping him, aren't you?" Tao stepped aside. Just enough. The dog's eyes fluttered open at the sound of her voice. He let out the faintest cry, hoarse and broken, and Nessa's heart shattered. She cradled his head and felt a tear slip down her cheek as the chimps watched silently. His collar was embedded with rust and sores. There was no name tag, no clue where he came from, just pain. But Tao hadn't seen a stray. He had seen someone suffering. By the time Liam arrived, the dog had been freed and was half asleep in a blanket Nessa had tucked around him. The chimpanzees remained nearby, not retreating even as more humans arrived, and when the crate was brought to carry the dog away, Tao refused to leave the side until the door shut gently behind him. Later that night, under the soft hum of generator lights, Nessa sat beside the recovery unit, where the dog now lay clean and sedated. She whispered, "You weren't just rescued, you were chosen." She didn't know then that this dog, whom she would soon name Koji, was about to change everything they thought they knew about compassion, instinct, and the secret language between two species who were never supposed to understand each other, but somehow did. Koji stirred sometime after midnight. The clinic was quiet, except for the rhythmic ticking of the old wall clock and the soft chirping of tree frogs outside. Nessa had refused to leave his side. Curled on the floor beside his recovery unit, her arm draped gently through the bars, she watched as his legs twitched in a restless dream. Was he remembering the boy who once loved him, or the man who had left him tied to die? The door creaked open, and Liam peeked inside. "Still here?" he whispered. Nessa nodded, rubbing her eyes. "He whined a little when I stepped away earlier. I don't think he's ready to be alone." Liam stepped closer and peered down at the sleeping dog. Hard to believe Tao found him, or helped him. Nessa let out a slow breath. "It's not just help, Liam. He coordinated. He brought water. He recruited others. That's not reaction. That's compassion. Liam looked skeptical. You think the chimps knew the dog was suffering, like, emotionally? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled out a tablet and tapped on footage from the motion cameras hidden along the sanctuary edge. Frame by frame, they watched Tao arrive at the tree, alone first, then return with the others. One chimp had clearly stolen a water bottle from the supply cage. Another had a banana, and Tao, without question, had started to chew at the rope until it snapped. I don't know what to call it, Nessa whispered, but I know what I felt. That dog didn't survive by accident. The next morning, Koji's condition had stabilized, but his eyes stayed guarded, watchful. When someone reached too quickly, he shrank away. But when Nessa entered, speaking softly, he didn't flinch. She brought him mashed food, sat on the floor, and read aloud from a weathered old novel she kept in her cabin, a routine she had once used with a traumatized orphan chimp named Kima. Over the next 2 days, Koji grew stronger. His steps were unsteady, his limp pronounced, but the light behind his eyes began to flicker back. Nessa took him outside briefly on a leash, just to feel the sun. What she hadn't expected was what happened when they passed the outer fence, near the forest. Tao was there, waiting. The chimp stood just beyond the trees, watching. When Koji spotted him, he froze, tail low, unsure. But Tao stepped forward and made a strange sound, low, rhythmic, almost like a murmur. Koji tilted his head. Then, to Nessa's astonishment, he wagged his tail. She didn't dare move or speak. Tao approached the fence slowly, never breaking eye contact with the dog. Koji didn't growl. He didn't bark. He simply moved forward, pressed his nose against the gap in the wood, and licked Tao's hand. They remember each other, Liam said softly, who had silently joined them. Nessa nodded, eyes wide. They shared something we'll never understand. The story spread faster than Nessa could contain it. Someone from the research team leaked the footage, and within hours, it was viral. Headlines blared, "Chimpanzees save abandoned dog in Tanzania." Videos of Koji's rescue were shared worldwide, with people calling it a miracle, a sign of intelligence and empathy in animals few had ever imagined capable. But amidst the flood of attention, something darker emerged. A call came from a local in the nearby village. A boy named Mosey had seen the video and recognized the dog. "His name's Copa," the boy said shakily over the phone. "He belonged to my cousin, but when Copa tried to protect me once, he was beaten. Then one day, they said he ran away. I think they dumped him." Nessa's heart dropped. "He protected you?" "Yes," Mosey replied, voice cracking. "There was a fire in the house. I was stuck in my room. He barked and pulled at my sleeve until I ran. He saved me." Nessa sat in stunned silence after the call. Koji, or Copa, wasn't just a survivor. He had already been a hero before, his abandonment. When she returned to the enclosure that afternoon, Koji was sleeping in the shade. Tao was nearby again, lying on a branch, almost like a silent guardian. Nessa kneeled beside the dog and whispered, "You were left to die, and still, you choose to trust." How? That night, Nessa made a decision. She brought together the village council, sanctuary donors, and animal welfare officials to share the full story. Not just of a dog rescued by chimpanzees, but of what comes after betrayal. The speech she delivered would ripple far beyond Tanzania. Koji was left for dead by a human, and yet he was rescued. Not by another human, but by those we once thought were incapable of mercy. It wasn't just instinct, it was intention, it was grace. Koji, now stronger, stood beside her as she spoke. Tao, from a safe distance, sat calmly, a silent symbol of a connection no one had dared believe possible. And though many people still debated what truly happened that day, for Nessa, there was no doubt. The dog had been saved by the wild, and in turn, he reminded the world what kindness can look like, when it comes not from logic, but from the heart. The next part of Koji's journey was just beginning, but for now he had a name, a home, and something more rare than any headline: peace. Tao was waiting again the next morning, not alone this time. Behind him, 2 younger chimps sat in the shade, eyes curious but cautious. Koji stood at the fence's edge, tail low but not tucked. His ears perked the moment Tao raised a hand, not in warning, but in acknowledgement. Something about the gesture calmed the dog instantly. He sat, almost regal in his stillness, and stared through the bars as if understanding more than anyone could explain. Nessa stood nearby, arms crossed, her eyes never leaving the two creatures. "He trusts him more than he trusts us," she murmured. Liam, standing beside her, nodded, because Tao never lied to him, never raised a voice or a hand. He just showed up. The sanctuary's board had arrived that morning for a scheduled review, routine inspections, budget assessments, and updates on the conservation program. They hadn't expected to walk in on one of the most profound interspecies relationships ever documented. Dr. Lillian Hartwell, head of behavioral research, adjusted her glasses as she watched Koji and Tao interact. "We need to expand our study. This goes far beyond a single incident." But while the researchers talked ethics and hypotheses, Nessa saw something else, something quieter. Koji wasn't just drawn to Tao, he was healing through him. Each morning, when Tao appeared, Koji grew a little more alive. His limp improved. His tail began to wag more often. At night, he slept soundly, no longer whimpering in his dreams. It was as if Tao's silent presence reminded him that not all beings who approach mean harm. On the 5th day, something remarkable happened. The enclosure gate was left open during cleaning, and Koji, who had been walking in the inner courtyard with Nessa, caught sight of a stray shadow moving along the tree line. Without a sound, he bolted, not with fear, but purpose. Nessa screamed after him, sprinting through the tall grass. But when she caught up, she stopped dead in her tracks. Koji wasn't running from the sanctuary. He was running to it, to Tao. They stood just feet apart now, no fence between them. For a terrifying moment, the staff held their breath, waiting for a lunge, a misstep, a snap of wild teeth. But it never came. Tao stepped forward and sat. Koji mimicked him. Then slowly, he inched closer and rested his muzzle against Tao's shoulder. Liam reached for his camera instinctively, but Nessa stopped him. "No," she whispered. "This moment isn't for the world. It's for them." Later that evening, Nessa returned to her cabin, mind buzzing, heart unsteady. She opened the old journal her father had once kept, a sanctuary founder long gone now. Inside, scrawled in shaky handwriting, were the words, "We protect what we understand, and we understand what we dare to listen to." She looked back toward the open window, where the calls of distant chimps echoed faintly through the trees. Somewhere in that forest, a friendship had been born that defied everything science ever claimed to know, and a dog that had been thrown away had found the one companion who never asked for anything in return. But something was coming. Late that night, a truck pulled up to the sanctuary gate. Two men stepped out, rough, unfamiliar, and clearly not conservation staff. Nessa met them near the gate, flashlight in hand. "Can I help you?" The taller of the two grinned, teeth yellowed. "Heard you got a dog here. Big fella, scar on the leg. We think he used to be ours." Nessa's stomach dropped. "His name is Koji," the man scoffed. "We called him Meat. Tough little mutt. Good for guarding the yard till he turned soft. My brother said he ran off." Her hands clenched the flashlight. "He didn't run. He was tied to a tree, left to starve." The second man laughed under his breath. "Yeah, well, we're here to take him back." Koji, hearing the voices, appeared from the shadows, standing behind Nessa. The moment the taller man called out his old name, the dog shrank back slightly, then suddenly growled. It wasn't a bark, it wasn't even loud, but the deep guttural sound that rose from his chest made the two men freeze. From the tree line behind the fence, rustling began. Then movement. 5 chimpanzees emerged from the foliage, Tao at the center. They didn't charge. They didn't scream. They just stood, staring. A silent wall between the dog and the past that came looking for him. "I suggest you leave," Nessa said, voice steady now. "He's not yours, and he never was." The men didn't argue. They backed off, muttering, climbed into their truck, and disappeared down the road without another word. That night, Nessa sat with Koji in the courtyard. He lay beside her, one paw resting over her foot. Tao watched from the trees, still, like a sentinel. Nessa reached down and whispered into the dog's ear, "They're gone. Forever." Koji sighed and closed his eyes. Tomorrow, the world would learn what happened. But tonight, under the stars and surrounded by silence, a dog slept in peace, and a chimp kept watch, not as animals, but as souls that once met at the edge of death and chose instead to live. Morning. Dew clung to the grass like tiny glass beads, but the air inside the sanctuary was thick with something else. an uneasiness that words couldn't describe. Nessa barely touched her coffee as she stood in the observation shed overlooking the forest enclosure. Koji was pacing again, not with fear, but something closer to restlessness. Tao sat near the fence, his gaze following Koji with quiet understanding. The rest of the chimps had kept their distance lately, as if sensing a change none of the humans could quite name. Liam appeared at the door, his expression drawn. Security cameras picked up movement near the northern fence line last night. Same truck, same men. Nessa's grip on her mug tightened. They came back? He nodded. Didn't try anything, just parked there for a while. Watched, then left. His voice lowered. This isn't over, is it? No, she whispered. It's only beginning. Later that afternoon, Dr. Hartwell called an emergency meeting with the sanctuary board. Half of them thought the dog's presence was becoming a risk, drawing attention from dangerous people, disrupting the sanctuary's mission. But the others, especially those who'd seen Koji with Tao, knew something extraordinary was unfolding. An interspecies bond like this wasn't just rare, it was historic. And it wasn't just about science anymore. It was about compassion, healing, and survival. As arguments raged in the conference room, Koji and Tao sat under a jacaranda tree, the wind scattering purple petals around them like soft confetti. Tao slowly extended a piece of fruit toward Koji. The dog sniffed it, then gently nudged it back, resting his head on the chimpanzee's knee. That single moment, simple, silent, was more profound than any data chart or research slide. But the stillness wouldn't last. That night, just past midnight, the sanctuary's alarms blared. Motion sensors near the back fence had been tripped. Liam grabbed a flashlight and sprinted out, radio crackling on his hip. Nessa followed close behind, heart pounding. They reached the forest's edge and found the back gate ajar. Fence wires were cut. A small trail of boot prints led into the trees, toward the chimp enclosure. Koji, Nessa breathed, eyes wide. She didn't wait. She ran. By the time they reached the enclosure clearing, Koji was already growling, ears pinned back. Two figures stood on the opposite side of the gate, one holding a thick rope, the other a heavy black bag. "Back off!" Nessa shouted, stepping between them. The men didn't flinch. The shorter one smirked. "He's our dog. Don't make this." "Harder than it needs to be," Koji barked sharply, his voice echoing like thunder through the trees. And from the branches above, movement stirred. Tao dropped down from the canopy with stunning precision, landing between the intruders and Koji. His body was upright, arms tense. He didn't charge. He didn't scream. He simply stood, blocking the path, a wall of willpower. Moments later, two more chimps emerged behind him, flanking the tree line. The intruders froze. "Jesus," one muttered. "They're everywhere." The taller one shifted nervously, glancing at the shadows in the trees. "We'll come back with a trap," he hissed. "No," Nessa snapped. "You'll leave and never return. If you lay—" "One finger on him again. I'll make sure you're behind bars before dawn," one of the chimps hissed, stepping closer. The men backed away. Without another word, they disappeared into the dark, crunching footsteps fading into silence. Liam rushed to secure the gate as Nessa collapsed onto the grass beside Koji. The dog leaned into her, body shaking slightly. She whispered against his fur, "You're safe. We won't let them take you." Tao sat nearby, eyes still watching the tree line. Even in that silence, his presence spoke louder than any siren. He was Koji's shield now, guardian of more than just territory. He had chosen to stand for something most humans wouldn't understand, loyalty beyond species. The next day, the sanctuary board made its decision. Koji would stay, not as a temporary guest, not as a patient under observation, but as part of the family. A formal request was sent to local authorities, and charges were filed against the men who claimed him. The response from the community was overwhelming. Hundreds of letters arrived in support of Koji, letters from children, veterans, dog lovers, and even other sanctuaries. Koji's story had gone viral overnight, but it wasn't the dog they were all talking about. It was the moment the chimps defended him. That image, Tao standing between a vulnerable dog and danger, had captured the world's heart. People didn't just see animals anymore. They saw courage. They saw empathy. They saw proof that even in a world full of cruelty, there was still something sacred worth protecting. By the end of the week, the sanctuary had received over $50,000 in donations. A new enclosure was planned, not for separation, but for integration. A space where dogs and chimps could coexist, under supervision, in safety. The Koji Tao Trust Habitat, as Nessa called it. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Koji limped over to the hill behind the sanctuary cabins. Tao was already there, perched high, watching the horizon. Koji lay down beside him, resting, his head on the chimp's arm. They sat in silence, two survivors of different worlds bound by a moment of shared understanding. Nessa stood at a distance, watching through glassy eyes. Liam walked up beside her. "Think they'll be okay?" She nodded slowly. "I think they already are. Because sometimes the most broken hearts find healing not in those who speak the same language, but in those who simply stay." Weeks passed, and the sanctuary had settled into a rhythm that felt almost sacred. The boundaries between human and animal, species, and instinct had quietly thinned until they were nearly invisible. Koji was no longer just a wounded dog hiding behind trembling eyes. And Tao, he was no longer just another rescued chimp. Together, they had become a living testament to something most people didn't even believe possible anymore: pure, selfless connection. It was a Thursday morning when Nessa received the call she had been dreading. The investigation into Koji's former owners had led to more than anyone expected. Not only had they abused him, they had operated an illegal dogfighting ring deep in the woods. One Koji had narrowly escaped. The authorities were rounding up the remaining animals, those that hadn't perished or been sold. But one of the lead investigators asked for something strange. Would Koji be willing to visit the last site? It might help with recovery. Some of the other dogs, they won't let us near them. Liam thought the idea was crazy. He's been through enough. But Nessa understood what they were really asking. Not a favor, a presence, a miracle with 4 legs and a scarred past, who somehow hadn't turned bitter. After a long walk around the sanctuary grounds and a quiet sit beside Tao, she looked into Koji's eyes and whispered, "Do you want to help them now, the way Tao helped you?" Koji didn't bark, didn't move much, but he stood up, walked to the gate, and looked back, waiting. What followed over the next 3 days became something no one had expected. Koji walked into that broken-down barn, filled with the scent of rot and fear, and changed everything. The other dogs, some trembling, some growling, fell silent when he stepped inside. Not because he was bigger, stronger, or unafraid, but because he was calm, because he had survived. One by one they approached. Some touched noses with him gently. Others simply lay down near him, soothed by his stillness. And by the time the team returned on the 3rd day, nearly all the dogs had been safely transferred to shelters. He hadn't barked once. Back at the sanctuary, Tao waited near the gate, clutching his favorite tattered cloth doll. When Koji returned, muddy and tired, Tao rushed forward and embraced him, not like an animal, but like a brother. That hug became the photograph that circled the world. Within days, news outlets flooded the sanctuary's inbox. Documentaries were proposed, interviews requested. A major wildlife foundation offered a grant large enough to fund a decade's worth of sanctuary improvements. But through it all, Nessa made one thing clear. Koji isn't for sale. Neither is Tao. Their story belongs to them. Still, the attention brought with it more than just praise. Some questioned whether the sanctuary should allow such close interactions. "It's unnatural," critics said. "Dogs and chimps don't bond in the wild," but others saw it differently. "Maybe that's the point," one article read. "Maybe nature has more to teach us when we stop defining its rules and start listening." And then, one early evening, something happened that none of them had seen coming. Tao didn't show up for feeding. It wasn't like him. He was always the first at the gate, especially when Koji was nearby. Nessa searched the upper trees, the quiet corners, every path. It was Koji who found him, curled under the jacaranda tree, barely breathing. A sudden, respiratory infection had taken hold fast, aggressive and silent. The sanctuary vet did everything she could. Oxygen, fluids, warmth. But Tao's body was too tired. That night, with Koji lying pressed against his side, Tao took his last breath. And the moment he did, something in Koji's posture shifted. He didn't whine, didn't panic. He just sat, there, still and steady, nose buried in Tao's fur, holding space for a friend who had once done the same for him. They buried Tao near the hill where they had spent most evenings together, overlooking the wide stretch of forest and fading sun. Nessa placed a plaque beneath the tree. It didn't mention species or status or sanctuary ID. It simply read, "He didn't save lives to be remembered. He saved them because it was right." In the days that followed, Koji grew quieter, slower, but not broken. Every morning, he visited Tao's tree. Sometimes he brought a stick, sometimes a piece of fruit. Once, he even dragged his blanket there, curling up as if waiting for the chimp to join him. And somehow, that quiet grief healed more than words ever could. Nessa eventually wrote a book, not about the sanctuary, but about that single friendship that defied logic, species, and every unwritten rule of nature. She ended it with a line that would later be carved into the sanctuary gates. Some souls don't speak the same language. They just understand each other perfectly. Years later, children would visit that place and learn about compassion not from textbooks, but from the paw prints and handprints still worn into the earth. And somewhere under a jacaranda tree, where petals fall like whispers, a weathered dog with tired eyes would still look toward the woods, waiting, remembering, and loving in the quiet way only the deeply healed can. Because in the end, it was never about how Koji was rescued. It was about how he learned to rescue others.